On behalf of IFSP council members and the staff of IFSP, we appreciate your attendance and time. Post-meeting content regarding this meeting will be available on YouTube. This is a public meeting. While sharing communications, please do not share personal, private, or protected information. My name is Tia Webb. I'm an IFSP State Council member in the Western region. I advocate for the inclusion and the support of individuals with disabilities and their families. As a passionate mother of 4, I'm always trying to meet the needs of my children, and I'm persistent in finding resources. I also like to help and provide unique resources and information that support individuals with disabilities and their families. I believe the more resources available, the better. And my purpose is to advocate for those in my region and provide a flow of helpful resources into the community. This meeting will now begin. If you have questions about IFSP funding, please visit the My Life, My Community website. Rachel, please provide link to the funding page. The educational topic, DD Waiver Slots in Virginia, what you need to know. The main presenter, Nicole DeStefano, Region 4, DBHDS, Director Waiver Network Supports. Typically, we have regional breakout sessions during the coordinated council meetings. However, that will not be the case this evening. Instead, we have a panel of experts to answer your questions. We are joined by Anne Camporini, Region 2, and Melissa Sullivan, Region 3, both regional support specialists. And we have Michelle Guziewicz, Region 5, Community Resource Consultant. We also are joined by Ellen Kerr, our captioner from Virginia Hamilton Relay. Rachel, please provide link in chat for those who may need this resource during the meeting. If you need technical assistance or have questions unrelated to this meeting agenda, please send an inquiry to ifspcommunity@dbhds.virginia.gov. Rachel, please share that contact information. I will now turn the next portion of this meeting over to Rhonda Gaines.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rhonda Gaines. I'm the IFSP Community Coordination Supervisor. My role with IFSP is to foster the collaboration between Virginia self-advocates and their families who make up our IFSP state and regional councils. Please keep in mind, the intention of this meeting is to provide you crucial information on the waiver waitlist and the selection process. This agency acknowledges to this audience that we understand navigating community service systems can be very challenging. If there are individual concerns where staff of DBHDS can extend specific attention for resolution, please be encouraged to contact us at ifspcommunity@dbhds.virginia.gov, and we will provide guidance. The focus for tonight is getting the right information from the right resources to reduce frustration and also help to prepare for any upcoming announcements related to waivers. Attendees are encouraged to focus on the main presentation and to ask questions within the content of the meeting within the time frame that is allowed. Focusing on the main presentation from our experts is important for successful understanding of the waiver process. Here are the ground rules. Please be respectful of the main presenter, panelists, and all attendees. Your microphone will be muted for the meeting. Cameras are optional during the meeting. Please use chat for all communications and questions. IFSP staff will collect your questions and prioritize them for the Q&A session, which will be later on in the agenda. If you are unable to type your question in chat, please use the raised hand feature at the top of the screen, and we will circle back to answer those questions. Please be advised, there is no option for private chat messaging during this meeting. All comments entered into chat can be seen by all attendees. If you cannot use the chat box, please raise your hand for assistance. Questions unrelated to this meeting should be emailed to IFSP Community at dbhds.virginia.gov. The IFSP has the authority to remove anyone deemed disruptive during this meeting. Those are the ground rules for the meeting tonight, and I will turn this portion of the meeting over to Heather Hines.
Thank you, Tia. Thank you, Rhonda. Hi, my name is Heather Hines, and I am the program manager for the Individual and Family Support Program. The Individual and Family Support Program, or IFSP, helps people with developmental disabilities and their families. We are part of the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services. Our main purpose is to help people who are on the DD Waiver waitlist, and some of our programs and resources are also available to people who need help but aren't on the waiver waiting list yet, and also to people who have DD waiver. Before we get into our main presentation, I'd just like to take a few minutes to tell you a little bit more about what we do and encourage you to share this information with others in your community. So if you see on the slide there, the IFSP Community Coordination Program is where we're at tonight. And this involves our regional and state councils made up of people with developmental disabilities, family members, caregivers, and professionals. Council members help to organize our coordinated council events like the one you're attending tonight to provide information to people on different topics throughout the year. They build local support networks, act as liaisons with the IFSP, and share helpful information in their communities. We are grateful, very grateful for what they do to help others across Virginia. We also have a funding program, which happens once a year when people on the waiver waiting list can apply for financial assistance for items and services so that they can continue to live in their homes in their own community. We offer direct support through our partnerships with organizations like Virginia Commonwealth University Partnership for People with Disabilities and the ARC of Virginia. These collaborations provide family and peer mentoring opportunities, as well as leadership for empowerment and abuse prevention training. Our My Life, My Community website, developed with Virginia Navigator, serves as a resource hub, accessible to all, offering information on services and supports. You can also call the toll-free number for help with navigating the website, or if you have any other questions. Our marketing and messaging efforts ensure vital information reaches individuals and families and the wider community. Our IFSP First Steps document, available on the My Life, My Community website and in our annual mailer to people on the waiting list, offers an overview of the DD system and guides individuals and families on accessing resources and services. We also distribute a monthly digest featuring resource highlights, training opportunities, and upcoming events relevant to individuals with developmental disabilities and their families. If you'd like to stay informed, you can sign up for our email list through the link provided in the chat, or go to the My Life, My Community website. Rachel will also include some more links in the chat so that you can learn more about our other programs and follow us on Facebook too. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're really excited to share this information with you, and I'll turn it back over to Tia Webb.
Thank you, Heather. The educational topic tonight, DD Waiver Slots in Virginia, what you need to know. Nicole DeStefano is the Director of Waiver Network Supports at DBHDS. Nicole has worked within the Virginia state and local government system for over 12 years and has past experience with adults and children with mental health concerns for over 17 years in 3 different states, Virginia, Tennessee, and North Carolina. Her experience with people who live with intellectual and developmental disabilities is lifelong, as she had a family member who lived with an intellectual disability. Nicole obtained degrees in psychology and political science from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. She is originally from Connecticut, but enjoys living in a warmer climate with her partner, David, and her Australian Shepherd fur baby, Ruby. She enjoys traveling and believes that experiencing new cultures enriches your life and allows you to be a more open person. I'm turning it over to you, Nicole.
Thank you very much. Lynn, I'm going to share my screen if that's okay. Great.
Yep.
All right, is everybody able to see that? I hope so. Can one of my panelists say yes?
Yes.
Great,
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so welcome everybody. Good evening. My name is Nicole DeStefano, as Tia stated, and I am the Director of Waiver Network Supports here with DBHDS. Today we're going to be discussing DD Waiver Slots in Virginia and everything you need to know. So I know that it's a very anxious time currently because there was just a budget signed the other day and we are anticipating 3,400 new slots coming through. And this is the time that's exciting, right? So I just want to let you know that our division here encompasses community services for children and adults within the Commonwealth of Virginia who have been diagnosed with a developmental or intellectual disability and may be eligible for funding through assistance through the 1915C waiver known as our DD waiver. So before we get into all the waiver, fantastic fun stuff, let's talk about DBHDS and DDS. So the Division of Developmental Services, or DDS, our mission here is to assure that all individuals with developmental disabilities have access to quality supports and services when and where they need them. We strive at doing this through implementing through our values, which is collaboration, consistency, creativity, conviction, communication, and celebration. Today, we're going to cover what a developmental disability is and how it compares to the CCC Plus waiver. What is the DD waiver process, including where someone should start, such as an intake, waitlist, and the priorities, slot distribution, slot assignment committee, or WSAC, waiver slot committee assignment. Waiver slot assignment committee. Initiating a DD waiver slot, supporting decision-making, home and community-based final rule, or HCBS, customized rate, and the role and the importance of being connected to your community service board or your CSB and the support coordinator, your SC. Any myths of slots that we have heard in the past. And at the end, we'll have common acronyms and lingo, because if you work for or are with a state agency by any means, we love a good acronym. So the Virginia Developmental Disabilities Home and Community-Based Waivers, or our DD waivers, help eligible people with a developmental disability, a DD, to receive services and supports in the community. Funding comes in a variety of supports, including medical, employment, community living, community integration, etc. Virginia has categorized our DD waivers into 3 different ones: the Building Independence Waiver, or the BI, the Family and Individual Supports Waiver, the FIS, and the Community Living Waiver, the CL. And those are each different levels. So community living is our highest level of need. So that includes our 24/7 residential component services. The FIS is that middle ground that does not include the 24/7 residential component. And Building Independence Waiver is our most integrated and most independent waiver. How does that differ from the CCC Plus waiver? The Commonwealth Coordinated Care, or CCC Plus waiver, also provides similar home and community-based services. However, those individuals need to meet a nursing facility level of care. And this means that the individual are functionally dependent or have some type of medical nursing needs. There's additional information here that you can click and look at for the fact sheet, and it'll also bring you to DMAS's waiver webpage. Our CCC Plus waiver is designated and operationalized by DMAS, and the DD waivers operationalized by DBHDS. So here's a general, very high overview of the waiver process from start to finish. So we have our wait list. That's where you get on the wait list. From there, we go to slot allocation. Then we move over to the Waiver Slot Assignment Committee, or the WSAC. Then we initiate services. We have our support intensity scale, or better known as our SIS. And then we begin reviewing services annually. So the process to obtain a DD waiver can vary from person to person, as the waiver waitlist is in a needs-based waitlist. That means if there's somebody who's in a higher level of need, they may be higher on that priority compared to somebody who may not have those high levels of need. If the individual is in need, the first point of contact, they should go to their local community service board or their CSB to have an intake completed. During the intake, that individual and its representatives will need to have all the documentation and justification that the individual has a diagnosis of ID, intellectual disabilities, or DD, developmental disabilities, prior to their 22nd birthday, along with seeing if the individual meets the functional assessment criteria, which in Virginia, we determine that by the Virginia Intellectual Developmental Disabilities Eligibility Survey. We don't normally say that, we just call it the VIDES. Once determined the eligibility is met, then the individual is placed on our DD waiver waitlist as either a priority 1, 2, or 3, until the slots are available, which are given to us by General Assembly. Individuals on the waiver waitlist do need to remember to complete their annual choice forms, and that will ensure that you can remain on the waiver waitlist. This can be done either through your local CSB or community service boards, or in WAM's waitlist portal. When a waiver slot becomes available, either through the General Assembly approving funding or through a slot that's returned to the CSB will have a waiver assignment committee, or a WSAC, where the committee is of volunteers who have experience with either individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities. And those people review all of the CSB's priority 1 wait list that meets that high level of need criteria. That's what we call our critical needs scores. The WSAC reviews the slot assignment review form, or the SARF, and determines of those who are in most need of those services immediately. Once assigned a slot, the individual would need to apply for Medicaid if they're not already currently eligible, meet with their support coordinator to begin linking to services, have an individual service plan, or an ISP, meeting with the support coordinator, providers, guardians, and individuals to set up the goals and plan for the next year. The provider and the support coordinator will work together to submit a service authorization, or an SA as we call it, for prior approval for services, because Virginia is a fee-for-service state. All services must be approved prior to being initiated, and service needs to be approved and initiated within 150 days of assignment. We're going to get into more about the timeline a little bit more later on. You'll have this to be able to see. 90 days after the services have been initiated, an individual, guardian, provider, and a support coordinator will be contacted and being able to participate via the support intensity scale, as SIS, which identifies the level and tier of support that is deemed necessary for the individual by the team. Throughout the year, you're going to review any and all documents. That's your goal as the family member, the individual, or the guardian, and provide that information to ensure that the services that are being appropriately served to the individual, because you may be that person's advocate, or you yourself may be your own advocate. Annually, the support coordinator will connect with you specifically and come together to review the ISP and to plan for the next year's goals and outcomes. If an individual is in need of exceptional or specialized supports, the provider that the individual's with can request customized rate if the documentation and justification is present and the provider applies. So I know that's a lot, but we're going to go through it and break it down for you guys. So step 1, local community service board and an intake. Individuals are supported based on their specific individual needs and age-related developmental concerns. So the majority of our DD services are assessed at that local level, which is that community service board, through either a support coordinator or a DD case management. There are some support coordinators who are specifically DD representative, and then there are some support coordinators that can do both individual ID and DD case management. To be eligible, the individual must have an ID diagnosis before the age of 18 or a DD diagnosis before the age of 22 and have functional limitations to meet the VIDES and meet Medicaid eligibility and indicate whether the willingness is to accept that waiver within 30 days. As you can see, I highlighted that in green. That's really important. If you're not willing to accept that waiver within 30 days of it being assigned, then we need to reevaluate where you are on that priority list. So let's talk diagnostics. So an intellectual disability is characterized by sub-average intellectual functioning demonstrated by a standardized measure of intellectual functioning, such as an IQ score, and significant limitations in adaptive behavior. A developmental disability is defined as a severe or chronic disability of an individual that is attributed to a mental or physical impairment or a combination other than a sole diagnosis of mental health, is manifested before the age of 22, is likely to continue indefinitely, results in substantial functioning limitations in 3 or more of the following areas, which is identified in our VIDES, and reflect that the individual's need of the combination and sequence of special interdisciplinary or generic services, individualized supports, or other forms of assistance that are of lifelong or extended duration and are individually planned and coordinated. At intake with the CSB, it's important to have the documentation that addresses that criteria we just talked about. As we discussed in that previous slide, it's really important to have that documentation that states prior to the developmental period. So 22 is that cutoff for us. That can look like psychological evaluations, school tests, OT, PT, speech therapy assessments, medical records, Social Security Administration determination. Once eligibility is found and the individual meets the functional limitation via the VIDES, then an individual will be placed on the waiver wait list in a priority identified through the priority needs checklist, sorry. And we'll go over that next. So the priority needs checklist is located in WAMS, and the PNC, or the priority needs checklist, is completed at intake and reviewed regularly so that we can ensure that it's reflecting the most accurate and up-to-date information. The form includes a text box to enter all the justification for the individual's criteria. You can see that here in this text, and it identifies each priority level. Priority level should reflect the current status of the individual. And when people are initially screened, they should be instructed to contact their CSB anytime that there is a change in that life expectancy, a change in their life that happens. So if you're a priority 3 and something happens, you're hospitalized, or a new diagnosis pops up, or a change in your life, you're no longer able to live where you currently are living, please reach out to your support coordinator in your CSB so that we can adjust, or they can adjust that priority need if needed. If you're not willing to accept services within 30 days, then you should not be placed on this wait list. It is definitely, we want to have people who are ready and willing to accept these services within 30 days. So let's get into those priorities. Priority 1 are for individuals who are going to accept and utilize those waiver services within 1 year, or they need them, within 1 year. So that there's several criteria. Actually, there's 4 for priority 1. An immediate jeopardy exists to the health and safety of the individual due to an unpaid caregiver having a chronic or long-term physical or psychiatric condition that's currently significantly limits the ability of the primary caregiver to care for the individual, or there aren't any other paid caregivers available to meet the supports. The presence of a caregiver's physical or psychiatric condition is really important here. And so make sure that if you're talking with your support coordinator, that you're explaining that to them specifically. B, there's an immediate risk to health and safety of the individual primary caregiver, or another person living in the home due to either of the following options: the individual's behavior or behaviors presenting a risk to himself or others that cannot be managed, and even support coordination arranging for other services and specialized services. There are physical care needs or medical needs that cannot be managed within the support coordinator arranged generic or specialized services. C, the individual lives in an institution setting and has a viable discharge plan. D, the individual is a young adult who is no longer eligible for IDEA or IDEA services through the school system and has expressed a desire to live independently. After the individual attains the age of 27, this criteria is no longer applicable. Ooh. There we go. There is a caveat to that one. If this criteria, if the person is 9 months prior to ending of their eligibility for IDEA, they can be placed into this level priority. Priority 2 is anticipated that the individual may require services in 1 to 5 years, and the individual meets the following 4 criteria. A, health and safety of the individual is likely to be in future jeopardy due to declining chronic or long-term physical psychiatric condition of the primary caregiver that's unpaid. There is currently no other unpaid caregiver available to provide those supports. The individual's skills are declining as a result of the lack of supports. B, the individual is at risk of losing employment services and supports. C, the individual is at risk of losing current housing due to a lack of adequate supports and services. And D, the individual has the need and desires outcome that are adequate supports will result in significant improvement of quality of life. Priority 3. Priority 3 shall include individuals who will need waiver slots in 5 years or longer, as long as the current supports and services remain and have been determined to meet at least one of the following criteria. The individual is receiving services through another funding source, and that meets the current need. That could be something like the CCC Plus waiver. The individual is currently receiving a service, but is likely to need a service in 5 or more years. C, the individual has needs or desired outcomes that will adequate supports will result in significant improvement of the quality of life. If an individual meets priority 1 level for that criteria, then a critical needs summary, or a CNS, is completed by the support coordinator, or the SC. With the information from the individual, the family, and reports, that will all be incorporated into this critical needs summary. Once completed, a CNS score will be generated and maintained within WAMS. These scores must be reviewed annually and updated as needed when the individual's criteria changes. So as I said earlier, it's important to be in contact with your support coordinator in order to tell them anything that's changing in your life, so that then we can also update this critical needs summary if you are on priority 1. Annually, there must be a choice form updated within the waitlist portal or with your local CSB. Here you can see the waitlist and IFSP portal sign in, and it's important, if you don't have the link for this or you're not already connected to it, to reach out to your IFSP panel here and try to get that information and sign yourself up. I believe that information's already out, already. But anything that's for home and community-based services, this is for over an institutional placement, along with updating the types of services the individual is in need of and seeking within the next 90 days. So as we talked about earlier, if you have to be willing to accept them within 30 days, and then hopefully you'll be initiating those services and seeking those services within those 90 days. Please remember to annually update not just the form for choice, but also your personal information, and update all those services that you're going to need. That's really important. A lot of times we don't see that. We just see that the person has said, yes, I'm still in need of these services and I meet these criteria. But it's really important to update those services that you're going to need within 90 days. Not something you're going to need 25 years from now, not something you're going to need a year from now, not something you're going to need 10 years from now, but really, what are you going to need immediately? So we're going to move into our slot allocation. So this is a general typical slot allocation process. This year was a little different, and we'll talk about that and the reasons why. So the first thing in that green bubble you'll see is that the governor proposes a fiscal budget. That usually happens in late fall or early winter, and then General Assembly convenes between January and March. But special sessions like this year can occur when there is not an agreement on a budget. Once the General Assembly and the governor agree upon a budget and it's signed, which that happened earlier this week, thank goodness, then DMAS will submit the waiver application to CMS. CMS is our federal level, and so anytime that we have new waivers that come through, we do have to put our applications in again, requesting a match fund, because we do get federal match dollars for each of those waiver slots. After CMS approves the waiver applications, then DBHDS will distribute the slot allocation letter to all the CSBs, informing them of the number of slots each CSB will be receiving, and the WSACs will begin to assign those slots. So a lot of people ask us the question of, like, how do we determine how many slots each CSB gets? Well, there is some factors that come into play, and there's a formula for each CSB catchment area. It includes the region's population, the percentage of the Medicaid eligible individuals within that catchment area, and each CSB's percentage of individuals who are on that priority 1 waitlist. So this was in draft form earlier when we made these slides. It is going to remain in draft form currently until we have everything set and ready to go. But here is a draft timeline of how DBHDS anticipates allocating these 3,440 slots in the next 2 years. So each year we will only be awarded half of that. So it'll be 1,720 slots each year. And we're going to be allocating them every quarter for the next 2 years. One, because we need to do that for just getting them out. And two, we don't want to oversaturate the communities and the providers. We want to make sure that our infrastructure is appropriately designed, and that we have the providers being able to support that. So we have the annual allocation. In month 1, we're going to have those, in month 1, 2, and 3, we're going to have those WSAC meetings. Those are going to be conducted by each CSB and our regional support specialists, which we'll talk to those later today. In month 4, which is also going to be month 1 for the next quarter, we're going to have regional and statewide WSACs meetings. And so any slots that are unable to be utilized within that catchment area of that CSB will go to a regional level. So region 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if there's any left over from there, then we go to a statewide and identifying where are those needs. And then we'll repeat that assignment workflow ongoing to make sure that we're doing that every single quarter. Ongoingly, also, we're going to be doing some WSAC recruitments and training. As you can imagine, having this increase every single quarter is a lot on our system, and we want to ensure that we are bringing more WSAC volunteers to the table so that we can get this out appropriately and not burn anybody out. So let's talk about a SARF. So that's a slot assignment review form. It's completed before the WSAC or the Waiver Slot Assignment Committee, but is also presented at the WSAC to the committee members, and the committee members recommend to DBHDS the individuals eligible for the waiver slot based on their urgency of need at the time the slot has become available. So DBHDS is not the one who is selecting the people. It is the Waiver Slot Committee, who are volunteers who have experience with individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. They're making the recommendations to us to say, these are the people who we feel are the most urgent at that period in time who could benefit from this waiver slot. As I stated, the WSAC is made up of impartial volunteers who are trained by DBHDS. The individual must have knowledge, experience with individuals with developmental disabilities, and not be a current employee of a CSB, DBHDS, or board members, not current employees, owners, or board members of any agencies providing waiver services, or not be a family member of an individual seeking a waiver slot who's currently on a wait list. And we are actively recruiting any volunteers who are interested and eligible. You can see here there's criteria and their qualifications. We do have a QR code there. This has been posted on our social media on DBHDS Facebook. So if you meet that criteria and those qualifications and you're not a part of those groups that I just talked about, please sit there, get your phones out, scan the QR code, go to our Facebook page, and fill out that application and see, or pass it along to anybody else that you may know in your community who may meet those qualifications. All right, so now we have a slot assigned. So on the first day, day one of that slot assignment, the RSS assigns the slot directly in WAMS, and that slot is automatically placed in projected status. That means that the slot has been assigned to the individual, and then the support coordinator needs to reach out to the individual and the family within 7 calendar days. At that point, the individual and family need to accept within 15 calendar days from being notified. So it's a pretty short timeline, but that's because we want individuals and families to have services fast, and we want to be able to get that rolling as soon as possible. So what you really need to take away from this slide is day one, placed in projected. By 7 days, support coordinator should be contacting you and saying, hey, you've been assigned a waiver slot, whatever waiver slot that is, if it's CL, FIS, or BI. And then within 15 days, again, the family and the individual need to accept or decline that slot. If you decline that slot, then it'll look at the next person on that list that was suggested. Once that individual has accepted it, it is really important for you, if not already eligible, to apply for Medicaid. That is extremely important because the Medicaid process can take up to 45 days, and we want to make sure that we're moving that along as fast as possible for you so that you can initiate services. Within 30 days of a slot assignment, the support coordinator meets with the family and the individual to discuss the following: the individual's assessed needs, existing supports, and the individual's preferences, obtains a physical examination. This should be completed no earlier than 12 months prior to the initiation of waiver services, but if you've had one within the last 6 to 12 months, then you're already ahead of the game, so that's awesome. And begin to develop that personal profile completion of the SIS assessment as required by our VAC or our regulations with 122-200. The support coordinator will do that. They'll get all the information and submit that into us so that we can get that information for the support intensity scale. Prior to the meeting with the support coordinator should also provide the individual or family with a choice of services. So that can be identified by the need or the availability within that specific assigned waiver or within the services that are available within your area. Once Medicaid eligibility is received from DSS, then the ISP can be initiated, the providers can be identified, and the person-centered plan should really start taking place. The individual, family, caretaker, and support coordinator shall then contact chosen providers so that the services can be initiated within 30 days of that support coordinator, moving the individual from projected status in WAMS to active enrollment in our DD waiver. Don't confuse active enrollment with DD waiver with active enrollment with Medicaid, because they are two different things. And that is a lot of confusion that we see, is that active means I'm enrolled in Medicaid. Not necessarily. We have great systems, but they don't always talk to each other in that fashion. So being active enrollment in DD waiver is different than being active enrollment in Medicaid services. They overlap, but they're not the same. So here you can see a variety of the different waiver services that we provide and that we have in our state, which there's a ton. They're grouped in larger areas such as employment and day services, consumer and agency directed services, residential options, crisis supports, medical and behavioral support options, and then other. And those others are like assistive technology, electronic home-based supports, home modifications. There's some others in there like employment and community transportation, which is a newer service that we have. But it's really important to look at these services and see what is connected to the waiver that you have been assigned. I believe, Rhonda, we are going to be sending out the grid from that the ARC has so amazingly made years ago when we did waiver update and waiver redesign. It has each waiver, BI, FIS, and CL, and it's a grid that has all the services and a brief description of them, and then has checkboxes based on which service is eligible for which waiver. So in the event that services are not initiated within 30 calendar days, and the individual wishes to retain that waiver slot, the support coordinator will electronically submit a request in WAMS to retain the designated slot pending the initiation of services. So in order to do that, the support coordinator will do that, and they'll submit that over and say why the reasons are that we were unable to initiate services. And that can be for a variety of reasons. Maybe Medicaid's not up and running just yet. Maybe because we haven't been able to find a provider that meets the individual's needs. A variety of ways. Once that's approved by the regional support, specialist, then we have up to a 30-day extensions after that with a maximum of 4 extensions. Now that has changed a little bit. And as I have on here, that legislation that was pending approval, which is now signed and ready to go, that will extend those 30-day extensions to a 365 days, only between July of 2025 and June of 2026. So we want to really make sure that it's in between that time, because once we go back and that sunset bill is completed, we'll have to go back to 30-day extensions for up to only 4 consecutive extensions. So that would give us a total of 120 days. Okay. I do also want to stress here that after 150 days of not initiating a waiver, so that's the 120 days of the extensions, and then also the 30 days of trying to initiate a services, it could put that slot in jeopardy of being released because it's not being used. We want to really ensure that if an individual is offered and assigned a slot, that they are utilizing it. And if they are not utilizing it, obviously between this time period, it would be 365 days. But if we're not using it appropriately, then we need to report back to the General Assembly how many slots we have not initiated and used. And that slot could be used for somebody who could initiate services in a much faster fashion. So here, like we talked about, here are some things for you to do if you are assigned a slot. Apply for Medicaid at your local DSS immediately. If you're not already eligible, it could take up to 45 days, and that clock starts as soon as we transition over to active. So we really want to ensure that you get connected with your Medicaid and we get connected with the local DSS in your area. We also need to make sure that the support coordinator explains all those services that are available for your age and waiver. You need to pick a provider and have an ISP to plan for those goals and outcomes. That takes some time. It doesn't just happen overnight. So we have to also remember that there are 1,720 slots coming out through the whole state. That's a lot. We've never seen this many in one period of time. And then also the support coordinator and the provider develop that part 1 through 4 in the ISP with the goals and the outcomes. And then the provider themselves that are going to initiate services and submit the service authorization to us at DBHDS to approve to make sure that it meets that criteria. It's important to get that in as soon as we can. So those are things that you might want to be aware of so that you can kind of stay on top with your support coordinator. The support coordinator reviews that SA request from the provider for eligibility and criteria and then submits it for us for determination. Again, we're doing the same thing here in our service authorization unit. We're looking to see, does it meet the eligibility? Does it meet the criteria? And is it an appropriate service for the individual based on their needs? And all of that should be in the ISP. After 90 days of being in a service, there should be some coordination and there should be some type of support intensity scale being scheduled. So we call that the SIS. And I know that that is a topic of conversation currently because we are renorming the SIS to SIS 2.0, or we call it SIS second edition. The support coordinator will identify those respondents. Those respondents can be the support coordinator, the individual, guardians, providers, anybody who's providing services and knows that individual longer than 90 days is really important to have them there. The SIS vendor will contact to schedule all the identified respondents that the support coordinator has put into the system. Once that happens, then the support intensity scale assessment is conducted. This is an in-person meeting, and everybody comes to the table. They are asked questions about the need of the supports that the individual has and how we can best support that person so that they're as most independent as possible. A SIS level and tier is then assigned based on the respondent's responses during that assessment. So we have a process in place where this is not something that's appealable. It is everybody at the table is the one making those decisions. And so that is why that is not an appealable score, we'll call it, or a level or tier. It's because it's really based off of everybody at the table who's saying, this is the need. Here's why this person needs this level. Here's why this person is needing 24-hour supports, needs to be modeled, needs to be full transfer, whatever it is that that person needs. So the annual review in the ISP looks like this, and it's kind of everybody has to work together at the table. So we have the support coordinator, the individual, the service providers, and the family or the participants and the individual. So the support coordinator will schedule the ISP meeting and then completes parts 1 through 3, from the discussion at the ISP at that meeting. The individual attends and participates in the ISP, identifies what their wants, their needs, their goals for that year are. And the family participants attend and participate in the ISP, identify again what those wants, needs, and goals are for themselves and for the individual throughout that year. The support providers or the service providers, they attend and participate in that ISP. They're listening to what the wants, needs, and the goals are for that individual. And then based on that, they're completing their part 5 of that ISP. So that's really those support instructions. How am I as a supporter of a support provider making sure that I'm supporting that individual in their day-to-day life? What do they want? What do they need? What do I need to help them with? It's important for us to talk about informed choice. So informed choice is also an important topic for us through this time period. If you are a guardian or if you are a supported decision maker, it's really important to point out that the people that we work with have their own freedoms to choose the choices and make their decisions within their own lives, just as we can. So annually, support coordinators typically will, at the ISP, will provide the Virginia Informed Choice Form. It is important to always not to just look at it and sign it and move on, but to really look at what is the most integrated service that's available to the individual within that community. The Virginia Informed Choice will also ask to be updated and reviewed at the time of enrollment of a DD waiver, and then anytime there's a change in services. So if we're with a employment company and we're not really enjoying that or liking that, and we want to do community engagement instead, a new informed choice would need to be completed to make sure that we're representing all the options to the person. So like I just talked about a minute ago with supported decision making, is a way for people to get help with making decisions while keeping their own rights and making the final decisions themselves. Supported decision-making agreements are a great way for adults with developmental disabilities living in Virginia to document when they want to receive services with making those decisions, how they want to receive supports, and who they want that help from. Supported decision-making agreements give individuals with developmental disabilities the ability to receive supports with making various choices in their lives while also retaining all of their rights, including the right to make their own decisions. And here you can see that there's the different step-ups of least restrictive and most restrictive. Least restrictive is supported decision-making, and our most restrictive is full guardianship, which goes through a court-appointed process. Here at DBHDS, we do have a full-time staff that is dedicated to supported decision-making. So if you are interested in pursuing that with the individual that you and your loved one, or you as the individual want somebody to be your supported decision maker, you can reach out to Sarah Thompson and we'll get that information out to you. But it's really the least restrictive way, but it's a really great way of being able to say, like, I need help with making some decisions here and there, and I want to have somebody who's an advocate for me. Home and community-based settings. So a lot of people have talked a lot about HCBS rights. So the HCBS rule requires that in order for certain services to be Medicaid funded, specific requirements of the HCBS rule or the HCBS final rule must be met. This has some information here about if you are a guardian or if you are a supported decision maker, how that can be in place here, but it's definitely not to impair or prevent full compliance of the HCBS. The individual is able to live their life the way they want to. They can decorate their room any way they want to. They can have those abilities to make those decisions. Now, if there are barriers, then we can work with that. But we want to make sure that the person is living a life that is having choice, having decisions that they're making on themselves. This is also usually discussed during the person-centered planning meeting, so those goals, so that everything's mutually agreed upon, and that we don't have any surprises or people aren't being made to do things that they don't want to do. Home and community-based settings toolkit. I am touching very high on this. It is a lot to conceptualize, and it's a lot to take in. So here's a toolkit, and we have this for our providers and for our families. You can see here we have a statewide transition plan. We are going out and reviewing every single location that is identified and licensed to make sure that it meets our HCBS requirements for this rule and with the final government. I mean, the federal government. So customized rate. Customized rate, like we talked about earlier, is for individual specific needs that are extraordinary medical or behavioral. It is different than just a typical generic service. It is more additional supports. It can be within a community coaching, group day, in-home supports, group home residential, sponsored residential, supported living. Here's an FAQ that's listed here so that you can go and look at it. The provider does have to be the one that applies for that extra support, and it's just additional funding to provide for such things as like a one-to-one or specialized like staff who are able to work with that individual and meet their medical or behavioral needs. Support coordinators, sometimes they are in the past have been called case managers, have a really important role in supporting our people. Support coordinators assist people in gaining access to needed medical, social, educational, and other supports, essentials for living in the community in developing his or her own desired lifestyles, right? The SC or CM provide assessments, support coordination, coordinating of services, monitoring the implementation of the ISP, monitoring the quality of services and supports. Part of the SCs or the support coordinators monitoring of the services includes visiting the program sites that are licensed, the individual's homes, and reviewing all of the documentation every 30 or 90 days based on the individual's needs. So please work closely with them and in cooperation with the support coordinator. They are the person who's going to be able to help you work through anything DD waiver related. They're also the first point of contact to be able to know what services are available within your area and what services, if they don't know, that they can reach out to their other support coordinators or even to our regional support team here at DBHDS to find services and supports that meet the need. So some myths that we have identified that I have the great ability to answer here is if I or my family member is on the priority 1 wait list, then I or we will receive a DD waiver. This is false. I hate to break it, but there are only 3,440 DD waiver slots that are available coming through this allocation. And no matter how many that are on the priority 1 wait list, we will only get that many. We could have 5,000 people on a priority 1 wait list. We are only going to be able to provide waiver slots to 3,440 people. As of today, we are very close to that 3,440 people, but I do anticipate that our priority 1 wait list and our priority 2 wait list, which do vary every day, they will go up and down, so it'll ebb and flow. If we accept a BI or FIS, so that's building independence, or a family and individual support waivers, we won't be able to change to a different waiver in the future. This also is false. If you are assigned a BI or an FIS waiver and a CL waiver is needed in the future, again, I highlighted that in a different color, due to the need, a reserve slot request form can be completed by the support coordinator with the justification. Let me put a little more emphasis on that. With the justification as to why that higher level of waiver is needed is really important. Transitioning from one waiver to another can occur at any time in the person's services to the different waivers. So if somebody's in an FIS waiver and they want to live more independently and they feel that a BI waiver will better suit their needs because they no longer need whatever it is from the FIS, we can transition down to a BI waiver or we can transition up to a CL waiver. It's really, really, really important to get that justification to the support coordinator. I or we can assess for DD waiver through the Department of Social Services. This is also false. The Community Service Board or Behavioral Health Authorities. So RBHA, I think Blue Ridge is now one. I think there's another new one that just popped up, I think out in Middle Peninsula. That's called a BHA. They're the same thing as a CSB. They're that point of contact and that entry into accessing the DD waiver and the wait list. CCC Plus is accessed through the DSS or Department of Social Services. So if you're interested in this CCC Plus waiver, or if you think that the person or yourself meet that eligibility, then I encourage you to please go over to DSS and see if you meet those eligibilities. If I'm on the wait list, I do not have a CM or a case manager. So this is a depends. Not all of the support coordinators are assigned to people from the CSBs and the BHAs because not every CSB or BHA has those resources to provide case management. However, if you want active case management, you can request it. And if they have the resources, they can provide it. It would be through a state option plan, or you can private pay for those support coordination services, either directly or through a sliding scale, depending on what your CSB or BHA has available. And DMAS, DBHDS, and CSBs are all the same. Well, we are not all the same. A lot of people just will say the state, and I am a proud employee of the state, but we are all very different. DMAS is the Department of Medical Assistance Services at that state level. They're the entity that does all of our Virginia code regulations, our DD manual. We have some input into it, but really they're the owners of that. And they're also the owner of billing. So here again, like I said earlier, DBHDS is really the operational aspects of it. And DMAS, if there's anything money related when it comes to reimbursement to providers, it is through DMAS. DBHDS, which is the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services, is again that operational aspect of DD waiver. So we're the ones that are putting out all of this information that we just talked about. We're the ones that are coordinating the WSACs. We're the ones that are managing the slots, but we are not the ones who are the regulatory owners of that. CSBs or BHAs. Those are the community service boards or the behavioral health authorities at a local level. That's your first entry into it. So that's where support coordination and case management will occur, and additional mental health and behavioral health services are available there, which is a great resource if you are unsure of what other services you might be able to access while you're currently on the wait list. As promised, here are just some common acronyms and lingo that we have. So ADA is the American Disabilities Act. CM is case manager. Further along, you'll see SC, and that's support coordinator. We have in here DARS, which is the Department of Aging and Rehab Services or Rehabilitation Services. That's where a lot of our individuals will go for services for employment, especially transitioning out of school, and they need to get access to some employment services and may or may not be on a waiver. We go through DARS first for that. We have DDS, which is us, the Division of Developmental Services. HCBS, we talked about earlier, that's the Home and Community-Based Services. DOJ, I didn't touch on a whole lot, but that is the Department of Justice. There's a lot of conversation about the Department of Justice settlement agreement. And yes, we are in a settlement agreement with the federal government, but we are working and making strides in that. And these 3,400 slots are definitely bringing us closer to eliminating that priority one wait list. You can see VDH, that's the Department of the Virginia Department of Health, and then WAMS, which we touched on a little bit, and that is our waiver management system. So any of our individuals who are on a wait list or receiving waiver services with providers and service authorization is in our WAMS system. It's a nice way of tracking everything to make sure that we know who's on our wait list, who's available for services, who needs services, what services are already approved. So that is all that I have for tonight. I know it's a lot to take in, and I tried to get through it as quick as I could because I wanted you to have the availability to chat and ask those questions. Here's our website for all of our resources and materials that were found through developmental services. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you so much, Nicole. Now we will move to our panelists, our DBHDS staff who are experts in their field and very qualified to answer your questions. Just to reiterate, keeping in mind the intention of this meeting, so tonight's focus is on obtaining accurate information from the right resource to minimize frustration and also prepare for any waiver announcements. You are encouraged to focus on the main presentation, which Nicole has already provided, and ask relevant questions for successful understanding of this entire process. It's a lot of information, and so I'm going to turn it over to our panelists, Ms. Anne Camporini, who is a regional support specialist, Melissa Sullivan, who is a regional support specialist, Michelle Guziewicz, who is our community resource consultant, and Nicole DeStefano will also be a part of the panel. So I will start with one of our questions. And as you guys, you determine who is more comfortable or maybe a dual answer for our audience. First question. Is there a plan in place to ensure quality training and care for the additional staffing that will be required? That is to our panel. You guys are muted.
So I can say that if it's specific to our staff here at DBHDS, then we do have training that we provide. It is up to the providers themselves to encourage their staff to come to our trainings that we do have on a regular basis. We do have quarterly trainings. We have monthly trainings. And it is important for the providers, if it's the staff that are the providers, to take it upon themselves to come. We cannot force them to come, but we do highly encourage. We have provider roundtables. We have support coordination roundtables and regional meetings. So there's definitely a plentiful of opportunities for them.
Okay, thank you. Second question. If an 18-year-old child with autism who receives Social Security, they qualify for Medicaid CCC Plus Cardinal Care, what should be considered whether to keep the CCC Plus or to take the DD Waiver Slot? 18, Social Security, qualifies for CCC Plus now, offered a DD waiver. What should be considered?
Hi, this is Anne Camporini. I'm happy to answer that question. The waivers they're two different waivers. You cannot receive and accept two waivers at the same time. There are benefits to both waivers. DD waiver has a lot of different services, which Nicole highlighted in her presentation earlier. Some of the overlap that happens with DD waiver and CCC Plus is agency and consumer directed, PA, companion, and respite. Those are available in both of the waivers, the CCC Plus and the DD waiver. Also AT, assistive technology, and environmental modification are available through both waivers. However, there are very limited, other limited services that are available through CCC Plus. However, many people can be served adequately through the CCC Plus waiver and have all their needs met. And if that is the case, we would encourage you to stay on the CCC Plus waiver. We would encourage you to stay on the DD waiver wait list too at that time. So if at any time your needs changed, you could, talk to the CSB about changing your priority and see if that, you were to be a priority one and be pulled into the next pool for the next WSAT for slots.
Thank you, Anne. Okay, another question. Is a person's IQ level the sole determinant of whether a FIS or CL waiver will be offered? And if not, how is it determined?
This is Melissa. I can take this question. So you asked about, is the IQ test a determination for if a waiver will be offered, correct? So no, it is not. The way that people get offered slots or by the priority that they're placed on the wait list. Only people who qualify for priority one can be added to the pool of people who were reviewed to receive a waiver slot. And the people who get into the review pool, that is based upon their critical needs score. And the IQ test doesn't affect any of that.
Okay, thank you. Next question. What are some examples for why someone may be unwilling to accept a waiver slot?
I've heard, this is Nicole, I have heard many stories from families that they're fearful that if they accept a BI or an FIS slot, that they won't ever get a CL slot in the future if ever needed. I know that that's one of the biggest myths that I've heard, but I don't think you should be fearful, and I don't think that you shouldn't accept it if it's best for you and the individual that you are with, or your family member. Then I think that is your decision to make. If you're on the waiver wait list, you're on that waiver wait list for a reason, and we don't know specifically what those reasons are. But like I said, I think the one that I've heard the most is fearfulness of not being able to get a higher level waiver in the future if needed, which is a myth and we talked about earlier. Anyone else want to chime in on what they've heard?
I agree. That's mainly what I've heard, is just being worried that if they get to that waiver, then as things change, they can't change waivers, that they're stuck in that same waiver forever, which is not true. That is a myth.
Okay.
And rarely,
next question.
I'm sorry, I'm going to say rarely, I've also heard parents just say that they just don't need services right now, that they're okay. The child is maybe still in school and they're getting everything that they need, but they want to be on the wait list for future planning. So that might be another reason they don't want services within the 30 days.
Okay, thank you. The transition age to young adult qualifier for priority one is a little confusing. Can you explain it in more detail?
Sure. And we talked about it just a little bit, but I get it can be confusing for sure. I think the biggest thing to remember about that is that if the individual is receiving IDEA services through education, which is up to through the age of 22, then that person is still eligible for funding through the school system. And so that's really what it comes down to, is looking at, is there other funding opportunities or other services that can meet that need before we look at the DD waiver as that option, because there are available resources to that person where after you're 22 and you're no longer in school and no longer eligible for IDEA or IDEA through the school system, it's kind of like a cliff. Like you're supported and supported and supported, and then once you're out of school, there's nothing there for you. So that's why that criteria has been put in, to make sure that those people aren't supported all the way and then dropped. off that cliff, that we are still able to possibly support them if needed.
Okay. Next question. What is going to happen when all the priority 1 slots are filled through 2025? Currently, the state lacks sufficient service providers for staff to support those receiving services now. Is there a plan to meet this potential increase of staffing need?
So the first thing is, if we completely eliminate priority 1, I think we'll be very excited. I don't think we'll ever completely get rid of a priority 1 wait list, because everyone's need changes regularly, right? But I do think that it would be really great if we can get to that point, and then we can start planning differently and seeing what's coming down the pipe and planning for those providers and the supports. Can you talk about the last part of that question again? Because it was like 3 questions.
It says currently, it was a statement, currently the state lacks sufficient service providers for those receiving services now. So the question is there a plan to help meet this potential increase in need?
Yeah, I think we are always looking at trying to meet that need. I know that the CRCs, our community resource consultants, like Michelle, are out there working with providers, encouraging, trying to get people to become providers. We've also, in DBHDS in general, our licensing department has minimized the amount of time it takes to become a licensed provider from 2 years to 30 to 90 days. So we do have a track that has happened. And actually in the last year, we've increased, in general, the amount of providers that we have in Virginia by 1,000. So we are doubling down on ourselves by having new providers open every day. It may not be the service that necessarily you want in your area, but we do have a lot of providers that are coming through. Go ahead, Michelle.
So my team, I'm a community resource consultant, and we have an entire team of community resource consultants that are doing nothing but provider development. That is their whole goal, is they do provider training, provider development. They are helping to create new providers. There is a pot of funding that is there for providers. It's called Jumpstart funding. So there are things that are in place that team is diligently working on every day, and then helping the new licensed providers get up to speed. So they are working. It may not be as fast as everyone would like, but they are working just as hard as they can.
Thank you. Next question. Are guardians of a person with developmental disabilities eligible to serve on the WASAC? On the waiver wait list committee?
On the WSAC committee?
WSAC,
Did you say guardians?
Are guardians eligible to serve on WSAC? The guardians are eligible. However, there are some exemptions. If your child or your loved one is on the wait list, that will the person that you're guardian for, that is not allowable, nor is it allowable if you're a provider of services. Okay. Next question. Are you required to have Medicaid before you're approved for a waiver slot?
I can answer this one. The answer is no. Sometimes it actually takes being approved for a waiver slot to actually make you eligible for Medicaid. So that is why Nicole had covered earlier about applying for Medicaid as quickly as possible after the fact that you may receive the waiver slot. But no, you do not have to have Medicaid to have a waiver.
Okay.
You will have to apply for it and get it afterwards, but you don't have to have it beforehand.
Okay, next question. There was some confusion in understanding the acceptance of a waiver slot. So could you please go through how many days the individual or the family has to accept the waiver slot once it is extended?
Yeah, so day one, it's assigned. Within 7 days, the support coordinator will reach out to you And then within 15 calendar days, you need to accept or decline. That is the first part. So that's just accepting the waiver slot. Day 1, it's assigned. By day 7, the support coordinator needs to reach out to you. By day 15, you need to accept or decline.
Okay. Thank you. We have a question. Someone who currently resides in Maryland with plans to move to Virginia. They want initial information on how to get started with applying for waiver services.
This is Michelle. You can actually reach out to me and I can put my phone number in the chat here in just a moment. But the initial thing would be is to reach out to your community services board in whatever locality you're moving into would be your first step to establish and get back on the wait list here, because you will have to get on the wait list here in the state of Virginia. Anybody else want to add anything to that one?
The only thing that I would add to that is if you're on our wait list and still residing within Maryland, when you are assigned a slot, then you would have to immediately move to Virginia, or you would have to decline the slot because you're not residing within Virginia. We do not provide any services to anybody who does not live in the state limits.
Okay. Let's see, next question. If a child has a terminal condition, does that automatically place them in a priority 1 status?
I can answer that one. No, not necessarily. If the condition is being managed, and to a certain degree, it would be if there are exceptional supports that are being needed that surpass like generic supports, which would probably be the case, but you would have to demonstrate that.
Okay, and the next question. Are services extended under CL and FIS? Are the services extended different for those under 18 and those over 18? Under the CL and FIS waivers?
Yes and no. And I say that because there are certain services that are only eligible for individuals over the age of 18. So those services, yes, are designated differently. Those services are like companion services. It is really for people over the age of 18. So it's not eligible for individual under the age of 18. It also would look different based on day support. So day support is throughout the day for our individuals who are adults. But for our children, there may not be providers out there who are providing 9 to 3 services. They're really looking at more like after school services for day supports. So yes and no, it depends on each service. And if you have a specific question about that, I would say reach out to somebody here at DBHDS. I think Rhonda can get you connected to where you need to go, and then we can answer your specific questions on those services.
That would actually be me again also, because it would start through me and then we would actually farm it out from there. So I do all of the constituent questions throughout the state, just so everyone on the call knows my numbers in the thing. So any of those type of questions, you can start with me and then I can either figure it out for you or pass you on.
Okay. Next question. If the parent is the paid caregiver and there are no unpaid caregivers available, does that qualify the individual to move to priority 1 eligibility?
There would have to be an unpaid caregiver for 24 hours a day, a paid caregiver for 24 hours a day. So that's probably not the case. So if mom has time off during the day, and she's not being paid at that time, then no, she wouldn't necessarily meet that criteria unless she had a chronic physical or mental health condition that put the individual in immediate jeopardy.
Thank you. We have a question from someone who could not access chat. So Rachel, Lily, Kuhn, Lily Kun. I apologize if I'm not stating your name correctly, but Lily Kuhn has a question for the panel. She was unable to use chat. We'll just give it a minute to get her question. Thank you for your patience. Okay, maybe we'll come back. I'll answer a couple of more questions. I'll ask a couple of more questions from our list.
I see that Lily is trying to speak.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So it looks like she's trying to. Looks like she's unmuted. Lily, we can't hear you. Are you able to unmute yourself? We're not able to hear you. I see you talking.
Okay, I'm going to ask this question while how is Lily doing? Should we move to another question?
Let's move to another question and we could come back to Lily and try again at the end.
All right. Yeah, we'll try again. Next question. How do I request a new priority assessment?
If you have a change that happens in your life, then go to your support coordinator or your CSB if you have not been assigned a support coordinator. And that's where that priority needs would be assessed and determined to see where you might meet that level for priority 1, 2, or 3. RSSs, any add-ons?
Okay.
That is correct.
Mhm.
There we go. Can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
I am so sorry again for that. My question is this. Is anyone considering redesigning the waiver system to a grocery style waiver system instead of having these individuals in boxes? And I'm sorry, instead of having individuals in like the CI, the BI, the FIS, or the CI, instead of putting them in categories, have we looked at or have we thought about having like a grocery list to where like all the services that are offered on the list, and then that way you can pick and choose and still have criteria for some of them?
So Lily, just for clarification, kind of like a budget type thing where you would have like a certain amount of money and you get to go buy your own or purchase your own services.
Yes,
Is that
yes.
kind of okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks for that.
Yes,
Thanks for that question. Unfortunately, that is something that we would not be able to directly address because DMAS is part of our entities. That is the waiver. We just do the operational aspects of it, and that would really be a part of our regulatory fashion. We love the idea, and it's definitely something that we can explore in the future. But I think at this point right now, we don't have the people on the call that would be able to address that appropriately. So, but thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Next question. If you do not accept a waiver slot, will you be placed back on priority 1?
So
What do you do if you decline?
Yes, you can be placed back on priority one. If you are offered an FIS slot and you need a CL slot, or you feel like you need a CL slot, then absolutely you can decline and be placed back on the wait list. If you are offered the slot that you need, so if you were offered a CL slot and you still chose to decline, that you did not want to start services within 30 days, then that's different, because that would be like you were not willing to accept services within 30 days. But if you just decline the slot, then yes, you can be placed back on priority one.
Okay. Of the 3 waivers, which services are covered for speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, ABA therapy under DD waivers?
Yeah, in that grid link that was sent out, I think that Rachel put in the chat earlier, it has all of those services. But if we wanted to go through each one, that would be through therapeutic consultation. And there is therapeutic consultation therapy for occupational therapy, speech therapy. So that would be that service descriptor.
Okay. Could you use your own therapist or a therapist that's approved by Medicaid? So if you already have a therapist before accepting the waiver slot, can you continue to use that therapist, or do you have to use a therapist that is approved?
In order for them to have reimbursement, they would have to be enrolled with DMAS in order to be reimbursed through the DD waiver. That is separate from your typical MCO and Medicaid. So if they wanted to bill under therapeutic consult, then they would have to be a DD provider with DMAS. But if you wanted to just do general therapy under your MCO, then that is separate.
Okay.
And just to backtrack on that last question, therapeutic consult, the therapeutic consults in general are available through the FIS and the CL waivers.
And I will also say there's many people that get therapeutic consult for some things, and then just their regular insurance, Medicaid pays for speech, occupational, just like you and I would get if we were in the community, or maybe do get in the community, that are just our regular insurance pays for it also.
Okay, this question is regarding waiver services in another state. So they're asking if a person receives waiver services in another state and move, like say they move to Virginia, will those waiver services transfer, or will they lose the service and have to reapply in Virginia?
I can answer that one. And Deanna put actually a really good answer in the chat also, but waiver services do not transfer from state to state. If you are on a waiver in the state of Virginia and you move to Tennessee, then you must give up your waiver slot and start again in Tennessee or Ohio or whatever state, and vice versa. They don't cross state lines. And as Deanna said in her answer, part of that is because every state runs it a little bit differently, and it's the way it's funded. And I think somebody could probably read her entire answer. It was very good, but that's why they don't transfer as of right now.
Yeah, I'll just add a few other things to kind of clarify that, because that's probably the number one question that I've received in the past. And I do really want to make sure that this is clear, that waivers are state programs. And so each program is tailored to that state's population. So it's not apples to apples. I know that's really hard for people to understand. Now, it is possible that, if the person was receiving a waiver in another locality, another state, that their needs would rise to the level of prioritization in the other state, but that's not a guarantee. It really depends on how the prioritization is being done in that state. I hope that answers that question.
Okay. Let's see. Next question. If someone is awarded a slot, but they cannot find a service provider timely, so let's use, for example, a residential group home that they prefer. If this happens, when will they lose the slot? What is the time frame?
The time frame right now for new people is 150 days. That is a change proposed by the governor's new. There's a new proposal that would extend that to 365 days. However, what we would encourage in that situation is pick another service and, access waiver services so you can hang on to your slot. If you can't get the absolute service that you really, really want, is there something else that you can consider that would hold your spot and that could be beneficial to you? We don't want to take slots away from people. We want them to use the services that are available to them, even if they have to wait a little bit for the ones that they really, really want. So that's the best advice we give out to folks that are at risk of losing their waiver for not finding providers.
Okay, thank
And
you.
the only
Go
thing
ahead.
I want to add to that is just to remember, connect with that support coordinator. And if you are not finding the service immediately, then having that retained slot being placed in by the support coordinator so that it can retain your slot for the next 30 days. And again, right now it is for 150 days, but after, like Anne stated, after 2025, we'll be at 365 days once that goes into effect. But only for a sunset period. So it'll be ending on June 30th of 26.
Okay. What happens if you've accepted a waiver slot, but find that you're not eligible for Medicaid?
If
So,
that,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if typically a waiver slot can assist with being approved for Medicaid. However, if the end result is that you do not get approved for Medicaid, then we will have to take the slot back, because that is one of the requirements to have a waiver slot, is that financial eligibility.
Medicaid's the payer.
Yes.
And if the payer's not approved, then
But I will say in that case, when they are looking at the Medicaid for someone who has gotten a waiver, they're only looking at their income and their resources. They're not looking at the families anymore. They put them into their own, they call it a budget unit. So it does happen periodically, but I can honestly say I've been at the state for a long time now, and it's not happened very often that I know of. Anybody else?
eligibility issues are kind of complex, and I worked in social services for 10 years, not in eligibility, but as a social worker, but I worked hand in hand with them, and I wouldn't dare speak for them. Their jobs are so complicated and so hard.
It is. I agree. It is hard, but
the other thing that I just want to throw out there is that there also was legislation put into General Assembly this year to there are people who apply for SSI and SSDI, and that is usually taken into consideration. And there has been a change in that eligibility factor. So that question is for us right now a little loaded, because we don't have the specifics on that from legislation directly. Like, we know what it says, but that interpretation is really what we're waiting for to hear. And DSS would be able to better answer that question.
Okay. And this next question is, if you guys are aware, they want to know how many DD waiver slots are available for this year, for 2024.
So currently for 2024 fiscal year, now remember our fiscal year goes from July to June. And so when we talk about when we get our waiver slots, we got 1,000 in July, and then we got another, well, we got 1,100, I guess, throughout this past year from July and January. It was split into two different allocations. So as of right now, we have used almost all of our slots. We have, it varies every day because we do have people who, what we call attrition slots, who have either passed away, who have no longer in need of use of it, have moved out of state. So it does change day to day based on what we have and who's utilized them. We have gone through our process and we've assigned all of our slots for the 2024 year, but for the 2025 year, which starts July of this year, but please remember, like, we're not getting those slots out immediately in July because we have to go through the approval process with CMS for a match. We would get 1,720 for the year of the fiscal year of 25. So that would start this July into next June.
Okay, thank you. Are students with IEPs eligible for waivers?
Not necessarily. You have to meet the general eligibility requirements for DD waiver. And I'm sorry, Nicole went over that in the very beginning. She defined ID, she defined DD, and there's a functional eligibility test that has to be completed. That's called the VIDES. And then of course you have to meet the financial eligibility of Medicaid.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just fielding the questions. Just looking at the ones we've already answered. Okay, we answered that.
Hey, Rhonda, I just want to remind everybody that we need to make sure that our questions are on topic with the conversation that we're having today. So if you're putting in any questions that are in our chat or bringing up other conversations, we want to make sure that we're staying on topic for the people that are here specifically for this. Just a reminder for everybody.
Yes, thank you, Nicole. I can't see everything going on with chat because I'm fielding the questions, but thank you. I think we've actually moved through the majority of the questions. Is there any discussion regarding rate increases to support the infrastructure needed for providers and staff of services? I think that is.
So that would definitely be a DMAS question as well. However, I will say that there is legislation that was approved for an increase to the providers for reimbursement. And I think that, thank you to our advocacy groups that helped to progress that forward with those legislators and asking request that. But the specifics of that would be a DMAS answered question. But thank you.
Okay. And someone would like to know the region of the city for Roanoke.
3. It's region
That's
3.
me. Yep, that's me. It's region 3.
Okay. I think we've
Rhonda, I added two more.
You added two more? Okay.
Somebody said, do you retain a waiver year over year? Do the slot counts for each year include only new people or both existing and new?
So I'm not sure if I fully understand that question. Do you retain a waiver year over year? If you have a waiver, you are assigned a waiver. You have that unless you're not utilizing it. If you're not utilizing that waiver, then that's when that could be released or asked to be removed. do the slots count for each year? And I'm unsure of the last part of that question. Kay, if you can put some additional information or elaborate on that question, we might be able to answer it a little bit better.
Okay. Question about IFSP funding. We can provide you a link to information that's a little off topic for today, but we will surely answer post meeting, and we can direct you and answer specific questions. Okay, great. Okay. I think we've pretty much gone through the questions that are on topic for this evening. Did you guys have any more questions to the attendees?
I see Lucy put in a question of, do the CSBs have their allocations of waiver for 7/1/24? Lucy, they do not. That's because the budget was just signed a few days ago, and we try not to initiate all of that until for sure we have a signed budget. So it is coming. It's just we had to wait for that signature, and it is now no longer wet, so we can kind of move forward on that.
All right. The any questions that were off topic for this evening's presentation, or comments that you would like addressed? We will take all of your questions and consider the best response and have those available post meeting for your review. So if there are any other questions that are related to the presentation tonight, you can place those in chat and we can try to respond. If not, we can wrap up the meeting. So all of the post-meeting content, including this meeting, will be recorded and available for later viewing. And you can go back and get all the detailed information that you need. One more question. Are waivers only for priority 1?
So right now, the FIS and the CL waivers only get assigned to people on priority 1. However, if someone is eligible or could use the BI waiver, then we also do look at folks on other priorities for the BI waiver.
Okay, thank you.
And I do think I saw a question that asked if you could be on the CCC plus waiver and on the DD waiver while you're on the DD waiver wait list, and the answer is yes.
Okay.
And if I could just answer, could I just
Yeah.
answer one? Because it was one that I'd spoken to, and it sounds like maybe I was misunderstood, or maybe I was confusing. But for Miss Wade, she was talking about her daughter's 7 in priority 1. She does have an IEP. What I said was, not everyone who has an IEP will automatically qualify for waiver. Sounds like your daughter does, though. So I'm sorry if I was confusing in that, in my explanation. It sounds like you're all set there.
What I'd like to add to clarify that is, so there's a rule that federal programs cannot duplicate funding. So it is possible for someone who has needs to receive a waiver slot, even if they are still able to receive services through IDEA, but those services would not be able to be overlapping necessarily. So that's a very individual question that we would answer in more detail once you got a slot and once we looked at your needs.
And that's the important part of being connected with your CSB and your support coordinator. They're the ones who are going to be able to identify all of those things for you and know exactly what's the resources are within your area.
See, does the DD waiver offer more benefits for younger children than the CCC plus waiver?
I think it would definitely depend on the needs of the individual. So I don't
Okay.
think we can answer that directly, but each one is very different. And my suggestion is to look at both of them side by side and see what meets the individual's needs.
Okay. We will take this last question and then we will close out the Q&A. Someone says, how long is too long to be on the waiver list?
It is a needs-based waiver.
Mhm.
If your need is high, then that's where you need to be connected to that support coordinator and that CSB and ensuring that you're updating it pretty regularly. If you're, as I think Melissa or Anne stated earlier, if you're at that priority 3 and you're identified as more of like, we're just planning for this in the future, it could be a while because you're planning for it in the future. You're not an immediate need. But if you're an immediate need, or if you're in need within it in the next year, then you should definitely be talking with the support coordinator and moving that forward.
Okay, thank you. As you can see on the screen now is our post-meeting survey. There's a QR code and link for your access. I think Rachel will share the link in chat. And we will start our wrap up for this meeting, and I will turn the meeting over to Lynn Fetter, who will provide updates, council business, and announcements.
Thank you, Rhonda. First, I want to remind you all that the recording and the PowerPoint slides will be shared on the My Life My Community website, and there's a link for that. That should be in the chat shortly, and on the IFSP Community Facebook page. Our next state council meeting is going to be virtual, and it will be on June 28th, 2024. Our next virtual coordinated regional council meeting will be July 18th, 2024. And our next coordinated in-person regional council meeting will be September 26th, 2024 at Blue Ridge Community College in Wayers Cave, Virginia. That will be with the TTAC Training and Technical Assistance Centers at VCU. They will come and present during that. And that will be from 12 to 4 p.m. State Council meeting is from 12 to 2:15 p.m. on June 28th. And the next Regional Council meeting on July 18th is from 6 to 8:15. To receive the latest updates from IFSP, please make sure that you are subscribed to our mail list. And we appreciate all of your attendance and hope you obtained useful information. I also want to give a shout out to all of our panelists and presenter, and Tia Webb, our council member, regional council member, who did such an awesome job introducing everything and keeping us going through the meeting as a co-host. And yes, another plug for the post-meeting survey. You can scan the QR code, and then there's also a link in the chat. So thank you very much and have a great night.